Rise of the Eco-Guards, stand on guard with me. Truly Canadian as Captain Canada. Changing of the Climates. Part 2. Hello, and welcome back to the Rise of the Eco-Guards, Stand on Guard with Me channel. In this continuing video series of Truly Canadian as Captain Canada, Changing of the Climates, I'll delve into some more subject matters that many are confused about, but are also being manipulated into believing is an accurate assessment by many confused politicians, business peoples, and even those considered by their own right to be economists, bankers, and elitists, whom are manipulating peoples and nations with their own flawed excuses for doing what they are attempting and in some cases successfully perpetrating upon humanity. For most people are confused about what many claim to be climate change, but are also not known as the complete suppression of peoples and nations, their freedoms, true liberties, and abilities to govern themselves. Anyways, as I left off on the past video, I indicated that adding to the melting of permafrost and the fact that it's also now releasing greater and greater amounts of those gases, and really far worse, that is truly unknown to the sciences, but that melting is activating those sometimes unknown microbials that have been dormant for thousands upon thousands of years. And now that they are active, those gases will increase and cause further contributing factors to our climate's warming and the weather patterns that come with such. That said, it's all part of the nature of those life forms, for that's what they do. They eat and convert decomposing biomass. Now understand this, when that consumption is complete, they'll do what all other life forms do, that no longer have food or energy. They'll die. So leave them alone, and don't think that your so-called solutions can change what God has put in place a great billions of years ago. But these natural factors also have been seen to have been transpiring in Greenland and Iceland, and even in the northern areas of Russia. Just look up on the internet all the sinkholes that are appearing throughout the world, and then learn some of those truths. But of course, those with the power over all our peoples will not tell you those truths. God forbid, for they then can't use all those to their advantages, to tactically distract and then rip off or even control all the peoples of this changing earth with their manipulated facts about climate change being completely caused by mankind. Here's a great example of that fact. There are some elitists in this world that have nothing better to do with their money and time than to try and convince you all that cow farts are of a great concern toward climate change, when in fact, these people are full of hotter air than a great many cows that naturally fart, for it's just part of being a mammal with a digestive tract. For even humans do that. But now, these retards want to bioengineer all cows so that they stop farting. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous? Nevertheless, truly understand the implications of such, for they could introduce genome-altering substances into that meat, as they are now attempting with that mass inoculations of many chickens, with their so-called bird flu vaccines. But that's not all. They are actually working on those stupid things. Well, I guess that's what you get from the guy that forced everyone in the world to continually pay for software licensing from his company for using that once great product or computer operating system. As he sat back and kept raking in that money over all those years, and then set up his own so-called not-for-profit foundation that he then gave that money to, mostly to get a tax write-off, as he still uses that money for whatever destructive programs he and his ex-wife wanted and continue to try. What a waste of such great resources and a limited once great mind. It's truly too bad that he truly never studied our world's natural history, for he, as well as others that surround him, could have learned that at one time there were millions upon millions of bison or buffalo roaming the Great Plains, and they did that for thousands of years, living and dying as their lives went on, as the earth never suffered from great climate devastations back then. And that's not to mention all the water buffalo that simultaneously existed in Africa, or all the other herds of animals that have walked the earth in our far past, like all those great numbers of dinosaurs that farted up a storm. And that storm never did much, except creating a big stink, but not as great a stink as what's currently taking place around climate change. That said, because of their recent actions, I believe that I've started to get a handle on what they are all truly up to. And it's not saving humanity from our so-called destructive ways. In fact, quite the opposite. Nevertheless, before I reveal those truths, I want everyone that's viewing this video to truly comprehend these perceived facts. This planet has been in a state of flux for its whole existence. It's an ever-changing mechanism that works to correctively balance itself. When certain major events transpire, the loss of life, whether animal or plant, can be supremely great. And not that I want to get into this right now, but I truly believe at one time, other great technological societies once inhabited this world. And most of those peoples disappeared after facing their own calamities, and there's slight evidence of those facts starting to surface. There's also other evidence that some of them may have gone deep underground, far deeper than mankind has ever dug, and may actually still exist. And believe it or not, that could explain all the recent sightings of strange craft floating in our atmospheres and waters. But truly comprehend this, if there were such societies, what evidence could be found on the surface? For this world has a great way of rusting, destroying, or decomposing all such traces of any matters that would have been used by any past societies, at least on the surface. Nevertheless, underneath that's a different story, and now that humans are starting to mine great sums of natural elements from the ground, many of those truths are surfacing and being concealed from the public. But some of those are also being unsurfaced and are rewriting our history books. Now, also understand this fact. When humans crack those surfaces seeking those natural elements, they can cause the breaking of those permafrost areas, thereby helping to quickly accelerate those conditions and causing a further great release of many forms of gases and other bacteria, some of which have never been seen or envisioned by any human beings. And all those factors play a great role in what's taking place upon this world. But also get this into your heads. All those companies doing these things, and while they do conduct those mining extractions, they are polluting the lands, waters, and skies to the extent that they don't want to be scrutinized by anyone for it. So what better way to keep the peoples from learning those truths, but to create distractions that focus everyone's attention towards something invisible that they made up as the reasons for what's actually taking place on our one and only world, while ignoring the real pollutions being pumped out into our waters, lands, and skies. But really there's more to it than just that, for they know that when a great many peoples learn these truths, that a great horde of them may seek to hurt these elitists and hunt them down. So they have now attempted to convince a great many business peoples, politicians, and governments that this world is overpopulated and that something needs to be done about it before our climate breaks. For they truly know that they have no hope of controlling the masses of peoples that have every right to be here as much as any one of them do. And truly comprehend this. That's not a conspiracy theory. They've actually written it and said it and are working towards those goals. And that evidence is everywheres. You just have to open your closed eyes to it. It's part and parcel with some of the works of the World Health Organization in 1964 called Codex Alimentarius Commission, a division of the United Nations Food Safety and Security Worldwide Program. And when it was first created, all good intent was truly found within. But when recently thoroughly explored, it's a program that was hijacked in 1974 by one of the hidden founders of the World Economic Forum, Henry Kissinger, and is now a hidden depopulation agenda. Now, with all that said, I've personally determined that climate change is real, but it's not what many governments or politicians are telling you. And also understand that humanity is having some effects on the accelerations of those factors, but not necessarily as much as those elitists and politicians are indicating. I would say it's more wrapped around the activities of some major business conglomerates that are hiding what they are really up to. And also understand this. When major weather events occur, that everyone needs to be prepared for these politicians, governments, and even those companies that all state that they care for you will be nowhere to be seen, as was very evident during major crisis of late within the United States of America, but also elsewhere upon this earth, including here in Canada during and after the many major forest fires that devastated many regions out west. And really think about this. The Canadian government has all those funds that they had charged everyone in this country as a carbon tax. but they still chose to do nothing for all our peoples in dire need. Talking about the carbon tax, the recently newly installed Prime Minister, Mark Carney, if you want to call him that, has now apparently canceled that carbon tax. But really he did no such thing, for the fuel surcharge still applies, and that's the main cause of all the hardships that Canadians are feeling every day. As far as I can tell, the only thing that the paper he signed did was to get rid of the carbon tax rebate that many Canadians were receiving and is now gone as of April 7th, 2025. And really this proves he cares not for anyone but himself and his closest friends. For this person, or elitist, as I like to call him, is beyond unbelievable and will face a great fight in the next federal election, and rightfully so. For he's the architect of that net zero agenda, or at least that's what we are all meant to believe. But I still believe he's nothing more than a hand-picked WEF minion that they want kept in place to continue to use Canada as the first testing ground for all their plans that all revolve around their Great Reset agenda. But really, moreover, he's a great deceiver. That now indicated, everyone should thank God every day for just waking up and having the opportunity to live, love, and be happy, at least to a somewhat normal manner or degree, while we all work within these ancient beast systems that are controlled by unscrupulous groups that have done so since antiquity. As we also do what is in our control to make proper changes in the manners of keeping our environments as pristine as possible for ourselves and our countries first, as well as for future generations that will all look back on this time as when those changing of the climates took place and we found our ways to the Great Awakening. And as for some of these current young peoples that are only expressing themselves and have no real solutions, but are attaining the attention that grants them the world stage, mostly because of the programming into great anxieties. Like Greta Thunberg and her statement in angered response of how dare you expect us to clean up your mess. She needs to understand it's not just our mess, it's hers as well. And yes, you're expected to clean up your mess, or haven't your parents taught you that fact of life yet? For every generation that consumes great amounts of man-made, cheaply made products that are designed to break down in 3 to 6 years, will have to work towards those goals if governments keep allowing all these companies that will not keep their work areas as clean and pristine as possible or going bankrupt and then change their titles while pushing those concealed assets and great funds elsewhere when they are done raping the world and then expecting the taxpayers to pay for the clean-ups as they further get away with all that they are doing. Now, as for any real solutions that would not only truly change our climates, but have lasting effects upon and within our environment. Well, there are many, but I would say the greatest pressing need would be to stop exploring, or should I say digging up those areas that still have permafrost. In other words, let them progress on their own natural courses. Then also stop burying our garbage in ever-increasing landfills. You know, it would be far better to recycle everything that can be done first, and then burn the remainder of that garbage to generate electricity for local needs than it would be to just place it in the ground. For it can be burnt, and even those gases that come off the burning can be reburnt, and those emissions from such can be filtered to great extents. And what cleaner CO2 does come from that burning, the plant life on Earth can deal with those emissions far better than the atmosphere can deal with the perpetual methane that's currently being ejected upwards from those landfills or garbage dumps, let alone the other mixed toxic elements that spew out from those landfill sites. But that also need to be done on a local level and should not be looked at as a way to bring greater and greater amounts of garbage in from regions that are not near to those places. There are so many other benefits to doing this, like far less pollutions finding their ways into our waters and lands, or even that fact that many of these dumping places have been used in the past to dispose of human remains by sick perverted people that have killed too many of other people's loved ones, as is sadly the case in Manitoba, Canada. And that's only the ones we know of. The next in these solutions would be to stop building great cities and skyscrapers and have humanity spread out upon the earth. And that's not to say stop building cities altogether, but make them much smaller, with buildings no taller than 7 to 8 stories, for even firefighters indicate that anything higher is too difficult to control in the event of fire. Spread out across the landscape, with the use of less concrete, asphalt, and heat-retaining elements. But also comprehend this. The whole reasons for skyscrapers was so that many people could remain or do business in any given region, but to also exploit the maximum square footage in any given area by building up opposed to out. For real estate is expensive in big cities like New York. And don't get me started on the reasons for 9/11. For I could indicate some interesting observations about those buildings that no one else has ever brought up, at least as far as I know. But also understand, in places like Dubai, the greater heat from their natural environment would climb those skyscrapers far faster and could alter the upper atmospheres even faster. And truly isn't that what we've been seeing and experiencing in the last 40 plus years across the world? And that's what I've said so many times in many of my past videos and many great conversations with people, that sometimes the very things that we think won't hurt anyone just cause more problems. And it's only after very many years that those observations can be determined to be accurate. And that's why environmental impact assessments are all bullshit, for nothing of these types of outcomes are ever considered, including when that was done for the link bridge between PEI and New Brunswick in Canada, for that concrete monstrosity surely alters the Northumberland Straits water temperatures. Now as for the CO2 being ejected by cars and trucks, there are wonderful solutions on the horizon, but it will take great visionaries to bring them to fruition. And I'm not talking about complete battery-powered or hydrogen-based vehicles. But envision this, a car that does not require rubber tires that wear down and only ejects water vapor from its fuel source and floats off the ground by about a foot, but can travel over terrain that's not covered in asphalt or concrete, but can also float over flooded areas during catastrophic events, thereby keeping people from getting stuck in place. And just think about this great fact: no more roadkill of small animals, whom have every right to be on this planet as well as creating guided luminescent paths that don't require asphalt or concrete covering, thereby allowing for rainfall to penetrate the grounds and be naturally absorbed. Now that brings up another concern that no one is talking about: automobile tires. Obviously, if you have any wheeled vehicle, you know that those rubber synthetic tires wear down. Well, where do you think that rubber goes? Well, I'll tell you, some of it is ingrained within the road surface, but much of it is turned to powder and goes into our water and lands every time it rains, and is then washed off that road surface. What impact on our environment do you think that's having? Or what impact on such do you think that many of those tire recyclers are having? For we've recently seen major fires at many of these facilities, and those devastations are beyond what any environment department will admit. For we've recently seen that in this province in Canada, a few years ago, and the toxic smoke and polluted water was everywhere. Now, you've just witnessed some of the slight conceptuals of the great eco-based solutions that will be required if humanity is to survive and remain on this planet for a great many more generations, but also comprehend the difference between our environment and what these elitists have been pushing as of greater concern, which is their altered and manipulated climate change agendas and their net zero agenda. That will never work. Anyways, the fact that the Earth has reached its current ice age termination point, and the further fact that humanity plays some role in the ever-increasing factors that are not only warming this planet's upper atmospheres, but are affecting our environment's elementals, such as our waters, land, and skies, should be enough to convince any skeptics. But it does not mean that we have to stop creating great innovative manners of living very productive lives, while we all continue to attain greater and greater knowledge about a great many subject matters. Anyhow, I'll leave off on this video, for I believe I've made my points quite clear about what is truly transpiring as it relates to real climate change, but also what those unscrupulous elitists are attempting at convincing the world's peoples about, and the facts that our real environment is being ignored at the cost of this climate hysteria. And I would ask that you join me again at a later time for another Rise of the Eco Guards, Stand on Guard with Me videos. And remember to respect each other, as well as our environment, and keep it clean.